Hello, students. In our earlier lecture, we had discussed about the term dramatic monologue. Now, we have to study the next term, and that is satire. Satire, for this understanding of this particular term, the the Bible for the English students or English literature students is the glossary by M.H. Abrams, and that you have to memorize that book. Every person should have. See, satire can be described as a literary work of art. It's a kind of a diminishing act, derogating, making it humorous, ridiculous. It's an evocation of an attitude of amusement, contempt, scorn, and indignation. It differs from the comic because comedy evokes laughter as an end in itself, while satire derides it. It uses satire uses laughter as a weapon against all that exists outside the work itself. So that object of the laughter may be a personal, so it becomes a personal satire. It may be an individual, it turns out to be a personal satire. It may be the object of ridiculation or ridiculous or humorous. It's of humor is maybe a class, maybe a person, maybe a thing, maybe an idea. So it turns out it may be a mankind also. Mankind. So how much of the Jonathan Swift's in Gulliver's Travels we have seen that the entire human race is is the object of satire. The distinction between the comic and satiric, however, is a sharp one. It only exists at its extremes. Shakespeare's Falstaff is mainly a comic creation and presented mainly for our enjoyment. Malvolio in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night is for most part comic. It has many aspects of satire. Ben Jonson's Walpole satirizes the type of person whose cleverness and stupidity is put to the service of cupidity. MacFlecknoe is a stringent satire, personal satire against Thomas Shadwell as a poetaster. Satire has been justified as we have seen, but if the criticism is there through the satire, if the comic and the comedy and humor ironically उपहासात्मक जर लिहिलं गेलं असेल तर त्याच्यामागे जे दुर्गुण आहेत ज्या चुकीच्या गोष्टी आहेत त्या दूर व्हाव्यात. दॅट इज बेसिकली द इंटेन्शन ऑफ रायटिंग satire. So it should be there is nothing that is more curative than satire. Its frequent claim has been to ridicule the following, to limit its ridicule to corrigible faults. A person is not responsible. Yes, we have seen Ben Jonson and Jonathan Swift are very good satirists. Death of Dr. Swift, he wrote, yet malice never was his aim. He alas the wise were spared the name. His satire points at no defect, but what all mortals may correct. His paddle hump, crooked nose, whose owners said, not up to books. So satire occurs as an incident. It's a kind of an element whose mode is not satiric. maybe a certain situation. So there are in the satire maybe in verse form, in prose form. It may be an attempt to diminish the subject by ridicule and recognizing the principle of the whole. These formal journals labeled as satires. So critics make a broad division between formal and formal means direct satire, informal means indirect satire. Formal satire speaks out in the first person. See, I may be addressed to the reader. Pope's moral essays. The character within the work itself, who is called an adversarius, whose artistic function is to elicit the credibility. We have seen Dr. Arbuthnot serves as the adversarius. They take their own name from great satirist Horace and Juvenal. These types of satire are more formal, and this character of the persona whom the author presents is a first person satiric speaker by the attitude and tone. Horatian satire, the speaker is the urbane and witty and tolerant man of the world, who is moved more to wry amusement than to indignation. As the spectacle of human folly, pretentiousness, hypocrisy, who uses a relaxed and informal language to evoke from readers a wry smile at human failings and absurdity. Horace himself described his aim is to laugh at people for their vices and follies. Juvenalian satire is another type of satire that we see. The speaker is a serious moralist, means he is very much serious about the moral teaching. So they uses dignified and public utterance to decry modes of vice and error, who undertakes to evoke from the readers contempt and moral indignation, unillusioned sadness for aberration of humanity. So we have vanity of human wishes are distinguished instances of genuine Juvenalian satire. This mode of satire resembles to Jeremiad. Indirect satire is another satire that we see. The most common indirect satire is a fictional narrative, means in the fiction form. The object of the satire are characters who make themselves and their opinions ridiculous. What they think, say, and do are made more ridiculous by the author's comments and narrative style. One of the indirect satire is Menippean satire by cynic philosopher Menippus. This type of satire, Varronian satire, is called after Roman imitator Varro. Nothrophia, in Anatomy of Criticism, suggests an alternative name. After a major instance of the type, such satires are written in prose, usually with interpolations of verse. Prominent feature of this satire is extended dialogues and debates, in which a group of loquacious, eccentrics, and pedants, literary people, representatives of various professionals and philosophical points of view, serve to make a ludicrous attitudes and viewpoints they typify. So, this way, we have seen the satire. Another satire that we can see here is Nightmare Abbey, satiric fiction. Aldous Huxley Point Counterpoint is a novel. So, we have seen Alice in Wonderland's perfect Menippean satire. It should be noted that any narrative or other literary vehicle can be adapted for the purposes of the satire. John Dryden's Absalom and Achitophel turns out Old Testament history into a satiric allegory on Restoration political maneuverings. Gulliver's Travels, Swift converts the satiric use of 18th century accounts of voyage and discovery. His modest proposal is written in the form of a project in political economy. Many of Joseph Addison's spectator papers are satiric essays. Byron's Don Juan is a versified satiric form of the old episodic picaresque fiction. Ben Jonson's Alchemist, Molière's Misanthrope, while Shelley's Country Wife, Shaw's Arms and Men are satiric plays. Gilbert and Sullivan's Patience and other works, such as John Gay, 18th century Beggar's Opera, and its modern adaptation by Bertolt Brecht, Threepenny Opera, as satiric operas. T.S. Eliot's Wasteland employs motifs from the myth in the work, which can be considered by and large a verse satire directed against what Eliot pursues as a spiritual dearth in the 20th century life. The greatest number of satires are written in prose. Evelyn Vaughan's The Loved One, Joseph Heller's Catch-22, Kurt Vonnegut's Junius's Play a Piano, Cat's Cradle, Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times are classical instances of dramatic satire. At the same time, in English, effective English satire has been written in the period in with the Middle Ages. Pieces in the English Punch and American New Yorker demonstrate that formal essayistic satire, like satiric novels, plays, and cinema, still commands a wide audience. And W. H. Auden is 20th century author who wrote superb satiric poems. The proportioning of the examples in this article, however, indicates how large a restoration and 18th century loom in satiric achievement. The century and half that included Dryden, Earl of Rochester, Samuel Butler, Wycherley, Abraham, Addison's Pope, Lady Mary Wortley Montego, Swift, Gay, Fielding, Johnson, Oliver Goldsmith, and late in the period, the Robert Burns of Holly Fair, Holy Valley Prayer, William Blake's Marriage of Heaven and Hell are good examples of the informal satire. This span of the time in the France in this particular period is such a major satirists like Boileau, La Fontaine, Voltaire, as well as Molière in drama. 19th century American satire we have seen broke the free English domination with a light-hearted satiric touch in Washington Irving's sketchbook. Edwards as well as Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn are this type of satire that we see. Essays of Oliver Wendell Holmes, Autocrat, of the Breakfast Table are satiric instances of this particular satire. So, satire is a kind of a weapon to lambast, to criticize the follies of human being. मानवाच्या चुकांवर टीका करण्यासाठीचं एक साधन म्हणून satire हे tool वापरलं जात असतं. So, we had to think from this perspective, and we have seen the tools that are used: irony, humor, comedy, derogating subject. Okay, so like this, it's not, but it is intended to make the follies cure. It's a curative effect that we see behind the satire. So, with these words, we have studied this term satire. In our next lecture, we will again go through another literary term in next coming lecture. Thank you.